A good friend of ours is in Nashville today in our studio with us, Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, and Jeremy has a new book out. I think he's authored of a dozen books on faith and apologetics, and specifically the New Testament. And this new book, which we've got up on our screen if you're watching, Body of Proof, the 7 Best Reasons to Believe in the Resurrection of Jesus and Why It Matters Today. I think for our audience, a lot of our audience who would say identify as being Christian and probably regular, if not weekly churchgoers, so pretty involved in their churches, the grassroots community. But you mentioned something as we were talking about this, and Jeremy, about proof for the resurrection.
Evidence.
Most of us say, this is like a faith. This is part of the faith, and you don't really have to go much deeper in that. If you believe, you believe. If you don't, you don't, and you've got to have faith to believe. But there is more.
Absolutely. And what I love about your Sekulow radio program is you all follow the evidence, and we can do the same exact thing as followers of Jesus. We follow the evidence. Faith is a response to evidence. It's not a rejoicing in the absence of evidence. And so I took 150,000 words that I've written from my PhD, studied in Oxford. As you all know, Jay has been a huge encouragement to me in my studies to be a Christian thinker. And we've spun out a book that gives the top 7 reasons to believe, the best 7 lines of evidence, if you will, of why Jesus physically, bodily rose from the grave. And here's the cool thing. This will equip pastors, Jay. This will equip Christian thinkers. The resurrection, unfortunately, is understudied. It's underpreached. So I'm excited about basing it in evidence, but then giving the reasons why it matters today.
But no resurrection, no faith is the truth.
Exactly.
I mean, if you don't believe in the resurrection, that is the fundamental.
Thank you, Jay.
The book is called Body of Proof. I'm holding it in my hand right now. We encourage you to get this, by the way, anywhere you get your books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books. Jeremy, let me ask you this question. Because there's a whole body of theologians that view the resurrection through the lens of higher criticism. In other words, well, we don't have historical proof, so it shouldn't be that central to the faith. And then, of course, the next step from that is basically no faith. What's the biggest takeaway from the book?
The biggest takeaway is the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so well evidenced it should be the central point of a Christian worldview. Jay, you and your ministry for years has helped us have a Christian worldview. The center point of a worldview is Jesus' physical bodily resurrection. Unlike any other religion or ism in the world, Christianity puts itself to a historical test. I mean, Jordan, archaeology is the closest cousin to Christianity. No other religion can claim that. And so while you all are here looking at evidence for whether it be Wuhan or evidence for this or that, we can look at the evidence. It is so good. The data is so strong.
What's the biggest evidence?
The greatest evidence that Jesus physically, bodily rose from the grave. Well, there's 7 actually, Jay. You've got to get my book. But
okay.
the number one evidence of why we know Jesus rose from the grave is his disciples had experiences of being with the risen Christ. And even secular skeptics will say they don't know what manner this is, but they will not deny with the fact that these early witnesses who did not believe, they're willing to die for it. They're not willing to die for a lie.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole central story of Jesus starts with a virgin birth.
Right.
So you've got to believe that. You've got and these tenets, and I think people kind of, again, all of these things. Maybe once you become a Christian, you think it's bigger about the spirituality, but you do hear it more and more in the faith world. For our audience to know, I mean, there are people preaching this doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, they consider themselves preachers. I don't really know what faith they're really selling to people or even trying to convince people on, because ultimately, if there's no resurrection, it takes away from the whole bigger story, which is that we all go through this resurrection experience at a certain point.
Jordan, there's 300 passages in the New Testament on the resurrection, and put that in context, there's only 260 chapters. There's 300 references on the resurrection of Jesus in the New Testament. And you all are attorneys. You all are renowned attorneys. You're published. You're peer-reviewed. Here's one of the arguments you guys might enjoy from the book. If Christianity was an invented religion, if they were making up the story of Jesus coming back from the dead, guys, they did a terrible job of it. I mean, if we just go back, because of our historical distance, we don't realize we would never, ever say females were the first witnesses of Jesus' resurrection. We would have them appearing to the Roman governors and the Jewish high priests. But why does the gospel unfold the way it does, the whole juridical procedure of Jesus? Because that's what exactly happened.
You know, it's interesting because we have been talking about evidence today on the broadcast. We talk about evidence every day. You say there are 7 major factors.
Right.
So we've gotten one. What's the next one?
So Jesus adumbrated it. He foreshadowed. He showed he had power over resurrection. Jesus messianizes Hosea 6:2-3, and he says, "In me you will be raised from the dead." Number 3, Jesus demonstrated resurrection power. So he not only said that he was going to die and rise again, that's Mark 8:31, Mark 9:31, Mark 10:33 and 34. He demonstrated resurrection power. There's an original contribution in my new book, Body of Proof. And I actually published this originally, Jay, in a textbook that, praise God, is used in state schools, if you can imagine that. There is no psychological, and you all are thinkers when it comes to this issue as well. Judaism is a coherent religion. And so the original contribution to knowledge is there is no psychological motivation for the early Christian movement to invent a resurrection narrative. Why? They didn't need it. They didn't need it. Judaism is coherent. Judaism believes in a general resurrection someday in the future. They could have honored Jesus as a great rabbi or teacher. Instead, they come up with this terrible talking point of Jesus physically, bodily rising from the dead. Nobody believed in resurrection. I mean, it wasn't in the zeitgeist of the day. It certainly wasn't in the entertainment, Jay, like ours today. And yet they said this is how it happened because it really did.
You have a whole discussion on, I did a book on Jerusalem as the biblical, legal, and historical evidence as the capital of the Jewish people, and that there'd been a consistent presence, sometimes very small, 40 people, 30 people, sometimes tens of thousands, millions, in Jerusalem, throughout Jerusalem's history. Now, you devote an entire chapter to the archaeology, because I use the archaeology in my defense of Israel, Jerusalem as a capital of the Jewish state. Tell us about the archaeological findings.
The archaeology of the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so strong, we can pinpoint the date. Are you ready for this? Of the crucifixion and resurrection, we have 2 options. It's either April 3rd, that's the day of the crucifixion. The resurrection would be April 5th. That would be AD 33, or it's April 7 for the date of the crucifixion. And then April 9, AD 30. And so you have 2 different options. The resurrection archaeology in the chapter that I gives you the latest evidences. As you guys know, because you go to Israel all the time, I know you've represented the Knesset, and you do so much for the land of Israel, and that's why I praise God for ACLJ. It's fascinating when you look at the historicity of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as the spot. It's fascinating to me. But here's the problem, Jay, and why I love your show. You create and replicate Christian thinkers. Most people listening to us right now, they couldn't offer one reason beyond Sunday school of why they believe Jesus physically, bodily rose from the grave. As Jordan pointed out, pastors aren't preaching this. The resurrection is underpreached. It's understudied. And yet every sermon in the book of Acts has the resurrection.
All right, the book is Body of Proof, The 7 Best Reasons to Believe in the Resurrection of Jesus and Why It Matters. It's by Jeremiah Johnston, who, of course, is a good friend of ours. I also need to say something here. Jeremy's dad, who's been a very good friend of ours for a long, long time, has had a health challenge. And I would just encourage you, as he is healing from that, to pray for his dad. Jerry is his name. And just lift that up to the Lord, because it's a health challenge. I believe they'll be victorious. But prayer is critical, and that's as important as anything else we're talking about today. In fact, more important. And again, the book is Body of Proof. It's available wherever you get your books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books, published by Bethany House. And great having you on, Jeremy.
Jay, thank you. Jordan, thank you.
Thanks for being here. So Body of Proof, you can go pre-order today. It'll be out in 2 weeks. Places like Amazon or wherever you like to get your books. Body of Proof, again, by Jeremiah Johnston. Check that out.